If you've been feeling triggered recently, it's because Mercury has recently entered Scorpio. This is a very interesting transit, to say the freaking least. Okay, Mercury has entered Scorpio and will be there for the rest of October. And in the coming weeks, Mercury in Scorpio is going to be approaching Mars in Scorpio. This is adding a bit of an extra razzle dazzle to an otherwise normal Mercury in Scorpio transit. And on top of that, November 9th, throughout the rest of November, Mercury is going to be retrograding back into the sign of Scorpio. So this October is very much a preview of what we can expect from the Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. And what we can expect is that tea will be revealed. The tea is piping hot, but it tastes like dirt. We didn't want to know that. It's very much a fuck around and find out energy. It's a very triggering, probing energy. And why? Because Scorpio likes to set traps. There's tripwires everywhere. It's unavoidable. Scorpio likes to set traps. Scorpio likes to test people. Scorpio wants to see if you can pass the test, because at the end of the day, Scorpio wants you to defeat them. And if you can defeat Scorpio, if you can defeat a final boss Scorpio, you have earned their undying, eternal loyalty and respect. Scorpio loyalty is really unmatched. But there are steps that have to be taken for you to get there. Right? Some of the Scorpio tests can look like showing you their absolute worst and like intentionally self-destructing and self-imploding and crashing out to see how you react and how you can handle it. Can you handle this? Can you handle these truths? Scorpio is kind of like being in a graveyard and digging up what's under there, right? Constantly digging it up. Can you handle this? Can you deal with that? And it's also very much like, with this Mercury in Scorpio transit, especially when we get closer to Mars in Scorpio, it is going to feel like what's being said and what's being revealed might be painful, but it also needed to be said, but it's also going to change your life and change your mind forever, right? Like you can unsee and unhear the things that are going to be said and shown and done during this transit. And when we get to the Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, that's when we're really going to be going into the surface and uncovering the receipts, right? The girls are going to be fighting this Mercury in Scorpio transit, and especially during the Mercury retrograde. Okay? Like the girls are going to be fighting. And people might say things that it might feel a little bit blunt, but you're not going to regret it. You can't take back the things that you're saying this Mercury in Scorpio transit, but especially during the Mercury retrograde. You can't take it back. So be very careful with the things that you're saying and the things you're revealing. You might even feel compelled this transit to move in silence a little bit. And you're definitely going to be taking stock, right, of the people you're surrounded by here. The masks are falling. You're really going to come out of this October and November really knowing who you can trust. You're really going to have a good sense of who you can trust and who is being effing for real, right? And you might even have a very negative response to people who aren't being fucking for real, right? And so this is going to be a very probing, controversial energy. That's what Scorpio is. It's very polarizing, and it's going to bring out that side in all of us. So we're all going to be on one end of the extreme, and the pendulum is going to be swinging back and forth. So get to the bottom of a situation, and you might even feel compelled in this kind of unstoppable energy within you to fight for the truth, right? To get to the root of a problem, and you might even just have this. And you're going to have this unstoppable drive to get to the bottom, get to the root of a situation. And the great thing about this energy with Mercury and Scorpio, I will say, is that there is something very spiritual about making a decision and sticking beside it. And remember that Scorpio is a fixed sign. Unlike the other water signs, Scorpio is not as fluid as Pisces and Cancer. And speaking of that, when we get to the Mercury retrograde, we're going to have this beautiful trine between the Mercury retrograde and Scorpio, Saturn and Pisces, and Jupiter and Cancer. And all of these planets will be retrograde at the same time. And so this is going to really This is really going to be clearing and cleansing some power dynamics that need to be balanced out. Right? So if you have an imbalanced dynamic in your life, the Scorpio, the retrograde energy coming in November is really going to bring that to your consciousness and bring that to the front of your consciousness. And you're not going to be able to think of anything else, right? There's a very obsessive energy that comes with Scorpio. And, you know, what I love about this energy, however, is that there is, again, something spiritual about standing on business and making a decision. Making a decision. When we go from Libra, which is a very indecisive energy, to the sign of Scorpio, Scorpio is where we really root ourselves down. When we really get grounded and we say, this is who I am, this is what I'm standing beside, and I'm standing 10 toes down on it, and I am going to die on this hill. I am going to die on this hill because it's worth it. And so this October and the retrograde season is going to be showing us where the lines are drawn. It's very much like, whose side are you on? Pick a side. You can't live in the middle. There is no gray area. This is a very black and white situation. And that can be very uncomfortable for some of the more fluid signs, right? For some of the more mutable energies like Gemini, Pisces, Sagittarius, Virgo. They don't want to do that. We just want to float around, air signs included, right? But this Scorpio energy is really forcing you to really look in the mirror and think about the truths that are painful but can no longer be avoided. And you may even find on the other side of this that it actually is almost enlightening to finally bare yourself and be like, I don't give a damn, right? Accept me as I am. And you might even find that you come out of this season feeling restored, feeling like, okay, like I am aligned. My environment is aligned with who I am. Or you may come out of the other side of this feeling like, okay, I really do need to purge, right? I need to do like a little bit of an unfollowing. I need to do a little bit of a like, you know, this isn't working for me. Texts are being sent. Like, so there's really two ends of the spectrum here. And Scorpio doesn't care who you are. Scorpio energy is like, no one is safe. No one is coming out unscathed, right? Fair is fair. All is fair in the games of love and war, right? Be careful who you're sharing information with, because that information is probably going to come Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. So, you know, remember, words are spells. That is very much Mercury and Scorpio energy. Words are incantations. Words are spells. Be careful with how you're talking about yourself, how you're talking about your life, how you're talking about other people. Words are spells, and it's a very powerful tool. People are saying what they really mean this Mercury and Scorpio transit. So truth hurts. Good luck.